Welcome to Notes to My Legal Self. Together, we explore topics of interest to in-house lawyers. We cover career, practice tips, leadership, the future of law, mental health, legal tech, and much, much more. Know someone who'd make a great guest? Let us know. Self-nominations are encouraged. They're an act of courage. Want to get the most from this conversation? Ask questions, comment, like, follow, say hello. In short, engage. Finally, have fun. In-house legal practice is a serious business, but you don't have to take yourself seriously. Let's begin. Here's your host, Olga Mack.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm really excited for today's conversation. It's going to be serious and it's very exciting. It's something we're experimenting with. And welcome. It's a brand new, incredibly exciting series. And we are kicking off celebration of the launch of our new American Bar Association book, Visual Literacy for Lawyers. You probably have seen me model it and my co-author model it. And it's been a great fun to write it and actually collaborate with the community because there's a lot of examples in this book. Many of them are publicly available without purchasing a book on our website. And really see that the traditional way of practicing law with massive unformatted blocks of dense text belong to an era that is gone, that is no longer with us. They don't protect clients, they just create bottlenecks, stall deals, and frankly, alienate business partners. True professional transformation happens when we treat legal work as clear communication tool. And it requires a completely new level of intelligence. My co-authors and I call it visual intelligence. And so over the course of this series, we're going to have, I think, at least 10 episodes and maybe more. We have an absolute powerhouse of lineups of global legal innovators joining to discuss how they use principles that we discuss in the book and apply it in everyday life. And so without further ado, I have a co-host that I will welcome to the stage and a guest. And for those folks who haven't met, Tessa and Dan, welcome to the show. Please introduce yourself. I'm sure many folks have encountered you in the wild on LinkedIn, in other hallways of law. But, for folks who might have met you for the first time, Tessa, please introduce yourself and then Dan, introduce yourself as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Olga, for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here live and to have this really important conversation around visual IQ for lawyers. As the co-author of the book with the American Bar Association, I'm really excited that we finally put visuals a little bit more on the map, on the legal map, especially in the age of AI, where the machine can generate so much text for us. But what if text is not enough? What if visuals are actually better, or at least a good, helpful tool in addition to the text? So that's what we're going to discuss about. A little bit about me. I forgot to answer the question, actually. I'm the founder and the CEO of Legal Creatives, and I've been working in this space at the intersection of law, creativity, and visuals for almost 10 years now. And it's been a really exciting journey to go from there to here. So that's a little bit about me. And now let's hear about Dan.
Dan, I'm sure folks encountered in the hallways of LinkedIn and other places, but please introduce yourself.
Howdy, folks. Thank you, Olga. My name is Dan Jackson. I'm the executive director of the New Law Lab, which is the interdisciplinary innovation laboratory at Northeastern University School of Law in Boston, Massachusetts, the United States. And we've been around for about a little bit over 13 and a half years or so. And I was the inaugural executive director. I've been engaged in legal design work since then, so for just a little over 13 years. And before that, I was I've had a lot of different professional hats. I was for purposes of the most relevance to this conversation, spent 13 years in large law firm and big law practice, both as a litigator and also as a in the human resources department, handling professional development for lawyers. And before that, a theater designer, believe it or not. So, and then maybe some of that will come into the conversation today. But most of my focus these days really is on teaching the next generation of lawyers, teaching them legal creativity, and teaching them to really expand their vision of what they can do with their law degree beyond direct, narrow sort of direct service view of law and society.
I love it. This is an unusual episode because Tessa and I will be co-hosting this series, and we will learn how to share this power seat of asking questions. So if there is a few hiccups, bear with us. We will learn to collaborate eventually, I'm sure. And then thank you for being here. I really admire your work. I know you're a massive champion and endorser of Visual Literacy for Lawyers, the book that we wrote. And really, let's just try to set the stage for the audience and kind of define the terms and maybe dive in. You mentioned visual literacy. Tessa has mentioned visual IQ a few times. Let's talk about it. When we talk about this thing called visual literacy in law, and you even dare to say creativity in law, that was a very brave move. Many practitioners assume it is just making documents look pretty, and so I'm curious, as an expert, how do you define visual literacy, maybe even creativity, and why it is a critical component of competencies for modern lawyers?
So I think that the two of you really are the experts in visual IQ and visual literacy. We touch on it in the classes that I teach, and obviously we touch on it in the project work that we do at the New Law Lab. I think it boils down to, two things. The first, on the creativity front, people need to understand as a baseline that I am of the opinion that law is one of the most creative disciplines and creative professions that we can engage in. I think that law as a concept, the concept of law and the rule of law, is one of the most creative ideas that humankind has come up with. And it's unfortunate that in the last 100 years or so, it's become gotten a reputation, and frankly, in practice, become a very sort of conservative, with a small c, not politically conservative, but just a extremely risk averse profession and discipline. There's lots of good reasons for that. You can tell I'm a lawyer because I'm throwing in a lot of caveats. But on the visual piece, it really boils down to communication, doesn't it? One of the key roles of a lawyer is to communicate. When the lawyer is engaged in work as a legislator or supporting legislator, it's communicating clearly what the law or the regulation is. When the lawyer is engaged either in-house or an outside counsel in either litigation or a transactional practice, you are communicating. In litigation, you're communicating ideas, you're communicating an argument to the trier of fact, and the person who will rule on the law as well. And in transactional practice, you're trying to come to the meeting of the minds. And so the deal documents need to be clear enough for people to say, yes, we are in agreement there. And so that means that lawyers need to be experts in communication. And for many, many, many decades, the primary role of the lawyer and the primary way that everything was communicated was on an 8.5 A4 piece of paper, black and white, literally typed. Wasn't too long ago, folks, that we had typewriters, so don't forget. And it was, passed from here to there. When I was a law clerk in my judge's chambers, we got memos from the other chambers by fax. In rolled papers, in fact, that's how we communicated with each other. But it was legal memoranda, and that was how the profession communicated. Well, the world is changing, and the world is changing quickly, and now there's a much greater emphasis on visual means of communication. That means our clients, our juries, are people who communicate visually.
Yeah, I will double click a little bit on this idea that rule of law is in itself a very creative idea, and relatively new in history of humankind, and it's very interesting that you actually highlighted it in your answer, and then quickly moved into visual as an important communication device in legal adventures, whether they're legislative or advocacy adventures. and how it is an important tool. Tessa, what are your thoughts?
Well, I could not agree more with Dan. And I think the fact that creativity is an act of imagination, I want to really reinforce that idea that it is a creative act, the rule of law and everything. I think there's a French poet who say that during the philosophy era, like in my previous life when I was living in France, but now I just forgot about it. But anyhow,
I was waiting for you to start speaking French. This would not be a correct episode if Tessa didn't broke out in the perfect French.
I'm actually forgetting my French, which is it is part of life evolution, I guess, but my own. But yeah, and it's part of the evolution of everything. I think this is what the legal sector is also in the process of doing, that evolution from text-based only documents to really understanding the limitations, and that it does create a barrier, because our human brains are wired for visuals. Some people may be even more inclined as visual learners to absorb visuals. And I think as lawyers, we adopted a very text-based way of processing information. So maybe we're a little bit more accustomed to process just text, but it is not the most efficient way. This is neuroscience. Neuroscience indicates we can process information faster, we can memorize it better. And it's all proven by a ton of research and academic papers. But now I want to move a little bit the conversation from the concept of visual literacy to the cost and also the benefits of visual. So what is, in your opinion, Dan, the cost of only using text, whether it's a memo, like you've mentioned, or the justice system, the court system? What is the cost of only using words, text, black and white? And what are the benefits you have seen in your practice of combining this text with visuals?
I think you run the risk, if you stick with the sort of traditional means of communicating legal ideas in text, you run the risk of missing a big chunk of your audience. You run the risk of not being able to communicate effectively what they're trying to communicate. The other, perhaps more important issue right now is, I think, in the current state of the world and business and commerce and everything in government, is our legal system, laws, and the players in our legal system are all being asked to interpret, analyze, understand much, much, much greater volumes of information and data than we used to have to, as a matter of just sort of standard operating procedure. So, big data, that was novel 25, 30 years ago. Right now we're into like humongous data. And sometimes that's the information that we need to be able to convey, either in deal documents or in litigation or what have you. That's the information that is at play, that is actually important, that is material. And what I have seen in my work is the ability of visual information designers who are capable of taking massive amounts of very detailed and comprehensive and complicated, that's the word I'm looking for, information, and be able to visualize it in a way that a large number of people are able to make sense of it very easily, simply by looking at it. I think Tessa's absolutely right. The neuroscience has been settled for years that humans are visual learners. This is how we primarily communicate. I'm reasonably confident that initial early communication was a stick on the ground with symbols instead of a thesis. Let me write something out to you, So that's sort of, it's at our core. But as our society and all of the anchors of our society, like law, the fundamental architectures are being asked to manage a world that is far, far more complicated than it was just 50 years ago. I think we owe it to the people who are being asked to play those roles, jurors, members of the legal establishment, judges and the like, to be able to condense things down in a way that's digestible so that humans can remain the decision makers in the law. And we don't have to turn over crucial decision-making authority to artificial intelligence bots. There's some risk and benefit for it. I silenced the room. Oh no.
Well, now if we start talking about AI, this is going to be. So I want to flip the script a little bit, and instead of talking about AI and technology, which we might do in a little while, let's talk about your background, Dan, as a professional theater designer. I think this is really fascinating. I mean, I have not met a lot of people who have such a, like dual background, and I understand you still do sometimes, occasionally. I mean, I don't know, theater design. And how does this lens change the way you see the legal artifacts, whether it's a document, a contract, a memo, a form? What can we learn from you, from this background, in order to inform us to communicate better to our audience? Because theater, you do a show, and the theater design background is here to support the show and to communicate better the storytelling. So how can we use some of I don't know, some golden tips from you or insights in our legal practice?
Yeah, well, no so pressure. Golden tips.
I don't know. I mean, to be disappointing you here at the end with my background. So, yeah, before law school, my undergraduate degree here in the United States was in theater design from Northwestern University back in 1990, and then I did that professionally for about 4 years, and then continued to dabble in it. It's been a while since I've done one, but I still like to say I still do it because come along and offer me it doesn't pay well. Let's just put it that way for the amount of time that I'd be able to invest in at this point. But early, and so that was a career that I had when I was very young, and it came out of I was working with members of teams, and in theater work, things are very fast paced and moving in lots of different directions, not dissimilar to law, but also lots of different, it's an art form that relies on empathy, and it's an art form that relies on engaging the emotions of the audience. And so everybody on the team needs to be pulling in that direction. That, I think, is a little bit of how I've sort of brought it over into the law. Now, mind you, I decided to go to law school out of theater because I was looking for a career I found myself more drawn to figuring out complicated ground plans for difficult sight lines in strange spaces I did not do a very good visual set design, but boy, could I figure out a complicated sight line space. So I was looking for a more analytical way of keeping my brain occupied. And obviously law was able to provide that to me. So I think early on, just the ability to work in a creative team as one of many members of a creative team, trying to work with sort of how to communicate best in a way that's going to engage the emotions of the audience. And in the law, hey, look, a theater background is fantastic for law. I often get prospective students who learn that I have a theater background. They say, oh, I thought I was the only one. No, au contraire, there's tons of people out there in law who come from a theater background, whether they did it professionally like I did for a period, or whether they just dabbled in it when they're in high school, college, or even community theater afterwards. A lot of law is performance. I mean, let's be really candid about that. And not just trial advocacy. A lot of law has a really performative component to it. And that actually can be relevant to the issue of visualization and visual literacy as well, is, the ability to, really give a knockout punch to the emotions in a good way. I'm not saying bad, violent way, but to really get people's attention and to, tug not just at their headstrings, but their heartstrings with a visualization, which can be done. I've seen it. It can be a remarkably, I think, valuable tool. And so in that way, it has been very, very helpful. It's also, a theater background really serves me well. I'm primarily a teacher now. Serves me very well in front of a classroom. I'm able to. Although I was a designer, they forced me to take all the acting classes anyway to get the degree. So I know how to do a little bit of a song and dance.
I love that. And then in theater, everything on stage really exists to communicate a narrative or support the storytelling for audience. Do you think lawyers forget that their clients and judges, or maybe even members of the public, are in a sense an audience that needs clarity, that needs connection, that needs this, which is kind of heart to heart, and therefore visual really is helpful?
I think the best lawyers know that, and I think the best lawyers do that. I think that the way that we, unfortunately, our legal education system, at least in the United States, I can really only speak for the United States, is a very sort of the first year of law school in the United States really tries to beat as much of that out of you as possible, as much creativity out of you as possible, to follow a very sort of rigid and narrow approach to the role of the lawyer and the practice of law and the role that creativity plays. But I think that certainly the most effective lawyers do understand that, do deploy that, and they deploy it strategically. You have to, you don't want to go in guns blazing, with the emotive and the empathy sort of argument every single time, because it'll wear people down. But you do want to know how to, I think, strategically deploy that. One of our challenges, of course, in the legal field is that there are restrictions on what you can submit to court in terms of the formats that courts are receiving. This is just in the litigation context, but I think we'll see some liberalization of that as, like I said, as the players in our court system are called upon to interpret and analyze and understand and decide really complex matters.
Yeah, you've been an innovator in law and specifically legal education now for quite some times. At the New Law Lab at Northeastern University, you're doing some interesting things. And you noted a critical question I think we need to address is, why should law students learn legal design? And why should law schools actually support teaching it? As someone who now also been teaching for quite a while, and I usually teach a class in a law school that never has been taught before. So for the very first time, and I go through the academic scrutiny of whether it's worth teaching. Should lawyers be learning things like product law, things like understanding of various technologies, things like leadership, things like various things that I've taught throughout the now 10 years, not at the same time. What is the missing link in traditional legal education that legal design solves? And how does mastering visual literacy serve as a practical starting point for the students learning to apply legal design in the real world?
Well, that's a lot. So let me see what I could do with that.
Sorry, please remember to answer every question thoroughly in the exact order I asked them. No pressure.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I may have to go back to the transcript and reread it. No. So first of all, I want to say I'm going to start with the question of legal design. Why should law schools be teaching legal design? In that regard, my definition of legal design is extremely broad. It includes visual design, it includes service design, it involves product design, game design, participatory action research, really broad, anything that connects with the creative arts, connects with the more creative practices, disciplines, and professions, at least as we sort of traditionally understand them as creativity. Again, important caveat, I think law is a inherently creative profession. We can continue talking about that at some point. I think right now we are at a turning point in history as it relates to the rule of law and its role in society. It is a fundamental architecture of society. I've said that before. It is, and you're absolutely right, Olga. It's only been around, at least written history. Now, I think actually the history of law goes way, way, way back. Whenever humans had to share a campfire, somebody started setting out.
I guess what I was saying is it's a radical idea, relatively speaking. Is accepted in some places in society. Thankfully, in the society we live in, it is also periodically challenged. And in the grand scheme of universe, it's a novel, creative idea. And that's why it's challenged. Good novel ideas are challenged all the time. That is the sign.
And it's it is absolutely one of the most creative ideas that we've come up with, and it's going pretty strong, actually, all things considered. In that it's had a pretty good run, and now there's lots of opportunity to improve it. I think that law schools need to understand that the that first of all, the law students that are coming in are looking for a more creative experience. They see a legal system and a world and the rule of law around them, and it is an absolute disaster. In the United States, we have what we call the Trump bump, which is the huge increase in the number of applications that are being sent to law schools. Lots of students are coming into law schools because they don't like what they're seeing in our legal system and in our judicial institutions in the United States under the current administration. So that tells me that students are looking for an opportunity to make change in the world in a positive direction, and that a creative approach to lawyering is actually the best way to do it, in my opinion. I think that law schools need to be teaching law students, in addition to black letter law and all of the things that you need to do to be a legal practitioner, which we need lots of, how to be a legal inventor. That's what it boils down to from my perspective. Giving students the education and the experiences to be able to walk out of law school as a legal inventor in addition to a effective legal advocate and legal service provider. Visual design then provides a really easy way for students to come in, not because it's easy, but because everybody understands visual design, right? Like sometimes students and others in the world, when I try to talk about legal design as a larger issue of sort of societal design and fundamental architecture of society stuff, and law as a design exercise, their eyes glaze over, they really don't know what I'm talking about. But everybody understands what a good looking document looks like, a piece of, like I said, a one pager that is beautifully designed, visually designed. Everybody can understand what that means and how to get there. And so visual literacy is one way for law students to say, oh, I never thought of myself as a creative person at all. And we always hear that in all of our classes. I'm not creative at all. I can't draw is the best one that I get. So I can't draw. Well, don't worry, neither can I. I was a theater designer. So, but I'm still a good designer. So I think visual literacy does give students a chance to tap into something that they can easily relate to. And they can take those legal documents that they're mastering as mastering how to create them, how to craft them, how to build them. And at the same time, learn how to communicate those ideas visually. It's a skill building exercise that's really exciting for them. That then opens the door for them to understand that there's a lot more they can do with their law degree than just be a legal service provider. And I'm not saying it's a pejorative at all to those who are legal service providers. I did it for many years. I loved it. And sometimes long to go back to it. But I think that gives students, I think, a chance to say, hey, there's more out there in the world of law that is really creative and allows me to tap into my fundamental human creativity, something that we are all born with. We all know how to play in the sandbox and put together building blocks. So let's start putting together those building blocks now so that we can improve the rule of law, improve the role of law in our society when there's so many things right now that are screaming out, calling out for us to do exactly that.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack here, Dan. I love what you.
Well, that's a big question too.
It is. It really is.
I'm
there's so
still
many
taking
things.
an accounting whether or not you answered every single part. Dan, I will come back to you with a balance. Don't worry. No debt is ever forgiven. No debt is ever forgiven in my world. Go for it.
But the fact that there's so many things I want to take the opportunity to kind of enhance, like the fact that yes, everyone is creative. Like when I do my teachings, and we know lawyers being a little bit creativity adverse, right? Not really thinking this is something they can do. And usually I like to break the ice by saying, hey, raise the hand if before becoming a lawyer and an adult, you were a child before. And well, of course, everyone is going to raise their hand. And as a child, you've never had problems with creativity or imagination. And so what happened is society is kind of crashing it. And especially law school, because we have to follow a very specific path and way to communicate that is text-based. And it's like anything that has colors or images, like this is deemed not acceptable. But for society, for people, for the client, from the user perspective, it's a lot more acceptable because it's a lot more usable. It's a lot easier to understand. And if we really want to add value, I think we are at a point where we need to start really putting ourselves in the shoes of the client, of the user. And even in business, when you think about a CEO who has to read like 50 pages of dense text, do you think a CEO is going to have the time to do that? No. And that's why legal departments in house counsels are making summaries and sometimes diagrams or flowcharts. So it's easier to consume that information and to make a decision. And so my question to you, Dan, is what for a law student, someone who's graduating, what's the value they can bring in the market when they know how to do the visualization part, and how can what's the value they can bring, whether it's in the workforce or whether they choose the entrepreneurial path, which we know there's a lot more now thinking about legal ops and everything. So what's the value, the tangible value that a law student who knows legal design and visualization can bring into the workforce or as an entrepreneur? What are your thoughts, Dan?
Well, I think the clearest one is that they are able to communicate with people who don't have legal training. I think part of the reason why law has found itself in the situation where visual literacy is a radical idea, a radical and great idea. I think one of the reasons why law has found itself in a situation where we have to break out of the 8.5 by 11 piece of text is because for many decades, centuries really, law as a profession was really lawyers communicating with each other. It was lawyer to lawyer communication primarily. That's what briefs are. That's typically what term sheets are and all that stuff. And now I think it's much more the lawyer's role to communicate with people who are not lawyers, who don't have law degrees. So whether that be your client, who's the CEO or COO or whoever it might be, or whether it be a member of the public, or whether it be society generally, you're no longer, as a lawyer, are just the person who is, you're only not just communicating with other lawyers. And in the job market, I think it is a good distinguisher for new graduates to be able to say, I have really effective communication skills with just about anybody that I need to communicate with: lawyers, judges, lay people, court personnel, you name it, experts, working with experts. I think that is probably one of the chief sort of distinguishing benefits. It also, frankly, we have to keep in mind it's a tough job market no matter what. And things like this look interesting on resumes. If you've got in law school, if you have a legal design project that resulted in a really nice piece of work that's visually really compelling, and that link hyperlinked is on your PDF resume, that people are going to be intrigued by that. Things that stand out as different and differentiate the job seeker from the rest of the pack, I think, are actually really valuable. At a more fundamental level, though, it really is an additional skill set that allows you to have an advantage in cases, in controversies in the workplace, just generally because you have that added ability to communicate. Like, I'm not a particularly good visual designer. You should see my PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to come to you. I'm just saying they're not good. And so, but I work with people who are, and that makes me, I know it when I see it. I know good stuff when I see it, so I can help steer things in the right direction. But myself, I'm not the one to take on that work. I wish that I were. I wish I had that skill.
Creation and assessment could be different skills.
Exactly.
And Dan, you are the co-editor of the book, Legal Design, Dignifying People in Legal Systems. You are also the former chair of the ABA Standing Committee on the Delivery of Legal Services. So how do you think visualization and legal design can directly impact access to justice and dignity for the everyday user of the legal system?
Well, I think in the most obvious way, the most obvious place where that is applicable is with self-represented litigants, with people who don't have the benefit of working with a lawyer. So in the United States, access to justice, self-represented litigant, that is a space that has a certain sort of vibe to it, for lack of a better term. But it's work that is all directly working on making it easier for people without lawyers to be able to navigate the legal system. And so, to again be able to communicate things, to reduce the complexity, to make it easier for people without a law background to understand the concepts, that are at issue or the facts of the case or what have you is a huge benefit. That creates dignity in the people who are going through the system. Part of the problem, and we make the case, several chapters in the book make this case, and certainly some of our introductory materials in the book make this case, that the way that the system is currently set up is really a de-dignifying experience. People who come in who might have limited English proficiency and they're having to navigate court forms that are all in English, or in a court system. One of the chapters in our book talks about a project that we had that was embedded into the Massachusetts Housing Court. And one of the interventions was a improved signage. There was like no signage in the hallways to get people to where they needed to get to. Where's the housing clerk's office? Where's the housing courtroom so I can get to my hearing on time? The easier you make it for people to move through a system in a very precarious point in their life. People are in court not because they want to be. It's usually there's something going wrong. There's a crisis in life in some way. And to be able to meet people where they are in that moment by making it easier for them, by communicating in a way that they understand, so that we are talking human to human instead of huge institution to person being jerked around by that institution, frankly, which is kind of how it is now. That, level sets and creates a level of dignity, of human dignity, I think that is beneficial to our system of justice to begin with, because it starts to put our money where our mouth is, for lack of a better term, because it says, yeah, we have these ideals that our justice system is supposed to be living up to. Let's start doing it in ways that are really, really to manifest themselves immediately in people's lives, like visual literacy, so that people can understand the systems that they are navigating.
We are coming to the end. I may have maybe one more question before we have to say goodbye. This is a group of people that I could spend a long time with, and I have a lot in common. So really enjoy this conversation. Then the lawyers watching this live right now or as a recording on the podcast, who want to stop waiting for permission and start implementing what is one everyday act or practice in visual leadership? What does that look like? How can they do it easily to implement it?
Other than buying your book, obviously, and giving it a read and trying to put some of those ideas into place, paying attention to the visual impact of the work product that's coming off their desk. Maybe spending some time experimenting. Now that we've got generative AI tools, and that's a whole complicated subject we're not going to get necessarily into, but generative AI tools are now doing a great job helping people with some rudimentary design abilities to create really impressive documents. Playing around a little bit with those and seeing what you can do, seeing what you can create, so that you can, so the next document that comes off your desk, if it's in an environment in which you can do so, has a little bit of a visual clarity that your previous documents lacked. I think that people would respond well to that, and who knows what you might get people saying, "Hey, how did you do that? Can you help me out with mine?" It can be, like I said, it can be a differerator in people's professions. And it's not nearly as scary now as it used to be, even just 15 years ago. It's not nearly, when we had to work with Adobe Illustrator, and that was like the only thing we had for those of us who weren't, didn't have a professional graphic design background. That was extremely intimidating. Now there's a lot more easy to use off-the-shelf products that are designed exactly for sort of lay people, those who are not a graphic design background or experience, but are able to then make use of the technology to do something that can be really impressive. And then that builds your skills, builds your sort of confidence, and then you can go a little bit further.
Yeah, I love when we talk about lay people, the normies, so to speak. Guess what? Yeah, normies are winning. Most of us are normies. So
civilians.
We're mostly normal. That is so good. That fantastic conversation. And Tessa, I love co-hosting with you. This is great. Both, thank you so much for sharing your insights and joining. And I usually close this by asking my guests to give one takeaway that viewers, watchers listeners can can sort of get wisdom to go and implement in their lives. So Dan, what is your takeaway that you would like to share?
I would say, the message I'd want to leave with people is for wherever you are in the legal system, whether you're an educator, a practitioner, you name it, wherever you are in the legal system, for the next generation of lawyers, those who are just coming in, be sure that you are mentoring them and educating them in a creative lawyer, in the fact that law is, in fact, a creative profession. I think we need to be elevating creativity in our profession across the board right now, because the rule of law actually does depend on it.
And that in itself a creative idea.
Yep. And we need to defend it with creativity.
Exactly. Tessa, what is one takeaway you want folks to take from this conversation?
Well, that since Dan he went for the macro, I'm going to go for the micro. And Dan mentioned there are so many tools that are available for us now to do the visuals, and even to some extent AI can really help do sketches or at least brainstorm ideas. But I would say you can use the tools you already have. Most people don't believe they can do visuals in Microsoft Word, and you can. You have icons. You can drag and drop those icons. They are already all there in Microsoft Word. You can use lines as dividers, or you can just do a little bit of extra spacing. Those are really small changes, but actually make a huge difference in the way your users are going to experience your document. And think about the first impressions. First impressions matter. All documents tend to look like, kind of boring, dull, black and white documents. If your document stands out just a little bit, you're going to give a great impression to your clients. So of course, you have to do it well. And so this is why I think it's good to do it one step at a time. And as Dan said, grow your confidence so you can eventually do more and more and more, and eventually create some of the amazing documents that are featured in the ABA book. We have like 20 plus case studies, absolutely stunning documents redesigned. And one day I'm sure you will get there. It's just a matter of starting.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you both for joining and having this amazing conversation, and one of many. So thank you so much for joining the Notes to My Legal Self.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Really loved it.
Thanks.
Very good. And audience, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is just the first episode of our brand new live series celebrating our ABA book, Visual Literacy for Lawyers. I'm really proud of it. I actually really love the design of this book. I did not suggest it. Tessa did not suggest it. The ABA did it on its own. And honestly, I think I've published almost 10 books now. This is my favorite cover. I'm going to declare it on publicly. I really love it. I love the colors, and I love what they did with it. So we have an incredible lineup of global legal design pioneers and practitioners ready to join in the coming weeks to keep the momentum going. And, as Tessa alluded a few times, make sure to head over to visualiqforlawyers.com to grab your book, including Books Companion Guide, and explore the case study gallery. Has a lot of examples that you can check out. And absolutely stay tuned for our next episode announcement. They're coming every week, every other week for the next few months. And we will absolutely see you next time on Notes to My Legal Self. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for stopping by. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Notes to My Legal Self. Know someone who'd make a great guest? Let us know. Self-nominations are encouraged. They are an act of courage. Remember, the future of law is bright. Enjoy your in-house practice. It's an adventure of a lifetime. See you soon.